All right. So, welcome everybody to the Blast from the Past. It's Jay
LaTrisha.
and we're here today to entertain you with information around Saturn and what Saturn can do with your life. Well, obviously, it's in your chart, and we take a look at what it does in your life. So, Latricia, what do you have to say about Saturn in your life?
Well, first, before we get into Saturn, Jay, we got to introduce ourselves. We can't
Oh,
just
that's
go straight
true.
into it.
You know what? That's true. Why don't we do that? So,
Yeah.
Latricia, ladies first, please introduce yourself.
Well, for those who may not know me, hi. My name is LaTrisha. I am a up and coming astrologer, and I started my astrology journey through as a kid using mythology and world history. So it has a very deep meaning to my heart. And then I found it through entertainment such as anime. I came back into it as an adult and decided to keep my study going and become professional with it. So that's where I am with my astrology journey. And I got picked up by Jay. So, Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your astrology journey?
Oh, my astrology journey started a long time ago, actually. More than 20 years ago, I looked into what can I do to improve my actually business consultancy, and I realized that some of the issues that people had really were more related to their psychology and their like personal, I don't know, to their fabric, if you want, the fabric, like the way they're made up. And then I said, well, it's either psychology or I by miracle came upon astrology, and then I realized that astrology is deeply psychological. So I decided I'm going to do this. Found a faculty of astrological studies in London, and they were also given as one of the most established schools for astrology around the world. And I decided, yep, that's going to be it. So I started studying. Did that for 6 years. It's 9 semesters. It's pretty profound, going into many more subjects, not only astrology. It also does astronomy and psychology and mythology and world history, again from the perspective of um, of course, astrological part. And a lot of people don't realize that the days, the calendar, many plays from the ancient Greek world, etc., they're all astrological. So very, very, very impressive. And then throughout the years, I added additional courses and certifications, and of course, gained some skills. I never did professionally so far, but with a combination of different things coming together, it was time this year to say, okay, let's do this and let's go into it. And here we are. So that's basically it. And as far as my expertise goes, and maybe Latricia, you can tell us a little bit more about your expertise as well. So my expertise really is, and I much enjoy doing like soul, karma, then the natal chart with its development throughout the years into what is going on in somebody's life at the moment, and with all that information gained, and also helping figuring out, how to improve someone's life to the degree of like, what's your perfect career, like where would that be most supported in the world, what does the energy look like right now to start changing your life path into that direction, etc. So basically it also goes then into coaching. But the astrological part, of course, comes first. It gives the information of what, who, where, when, and so on, and then the coaching can happen. So it becomes a combination of both with many people. All right, back to you, Latricia.
Yeah, so talking about my bit of professional experience with astrology. So, education, I've done a lot of courses. I went through the School of Traditional Astrology for my horary practitioner course, and that's also where I found my love of astrology. My deep love of astrology is through horary astrology. Is the one of the things that I like to work through, and I also do natal. I am a student at Kepler College, and I have realized, especially among my peers, is that a lot of people only use astrology for the psychological part. They don't really look at astrology through the, I don't want to say the literal, but the physical aspects of it. So, how does certain things in your chart play in your everyday life? And I think that in terms of where I help people in astrology is seeing that, especially when it comes to life cycles, which is what we're going to get into today, is one of the planets that has a big effect on your life cycle, which is Saturn. But also, before we get into the deep of the Saturn. Let's talk about Astromagistus, Jay.
Yep. Well, that's actually a nice, nice segue. So, looking at different cycles, actually was my Chiron cycle, and Chiron is about 51, 52 years until it returns to its natal position. And what you can learn about that is that that is the time when you really should, it's kind of like the final chance to keep your life juices going and embark on what it is that you really want to do with your life. And if you don't do it at that time, it kind of like, excuse me, the life energy kind of withdraws supposedly, and you kind of going, then is when most people start actually going into old age, because they have never, like, if you do not change course at that moment, again, like roughly the early 50s, and you just go on into whatever you have done before, and that is not really your thing, then the life energy is removing itself more and more, and kind of like a tree losing the water and going into fall, and then the leaves start falling. Exactly, kind of like that. Whereas people that really are in their element and keep going, talking about life cycles again, and they hit their next Saturn return, which is around 57, 58, they actually then are getting into their like rightful age. And that is another promise of Saturn, since we're talking about that today, is when you apply yourself or whatever you do, you can expect to reap the harvest. You have a cornucopia of wealth and everything, but it's application. You have to do the step by step diligent work for that. And what I'm saying is that if you decided with the Chiron cycle getting to its full turn, that you do now want to really focus on what it is, and then you continue doing that, then also the Saturn return on your 58th birthday does not mean now you become old and senile and may die soon, but actually you get into your full being even at a later age. And you can see that with some people that are completely passionate about what they're doing. They're 70 or 80 years old and they're still full of energy and full of life and everything else. So that is what makes a difference, really, astrologically speaking.
Okay,
and
but what are we
about
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And Astromagistus, to bring it back to that now. So that's how I came to Astromagistus, because looking at people and my experience working with people was that many are seeking for something, and we have a lot of different kind of approaches on our website. And I would really encourage anybody to just come to the website, take a booking. It starts with the natal chart, really. I would say that is what anybody definitely should do. But if you want to go even beyond that and understand much more about yourself, take the comprehensive chart, which is called the Astromagistus reading, because that starts with the soul level, brings in the karma, and ends up, like I said, with where we are today and into the near future. It gives a really deep, insightful interpretation, really, and promised you will be very happy with understanding yourself at that moment. So please, LaTrisha, you have prepared some stuff for us today.
Yes, I did. But one more thing before we go into the Saturn thing, because you talked about how awesome Astromagistus is and how we can help people. But also, you got to remember, too, and this is especially beneficial for our audience members, is that we have multiple astrologers on Astromagistus, and we will all be doing a different podcast every day of the week. So Monday through Friday, you will have different podcasts. And we just had our first podcast yesterday. That was the Mystic Muses, I believe.
Yes, Mystic Muses. Yeah. No, wait. It's Muses, but the Moonlit Muses.
Moonlit Muses. Thank you.
Well, yeah, because it is Monday, and they decided, you know what, Monday, let's do Moon Day, basically.
Moon Day, yes.
Exactly. And every Monday is a different moon. So, I mean, in the sense of different signs. So they decided every Monday they're going to take what do we have? Like, what sign of the moon do we have that Monday? And they're going to actually provide information, and hopefully, well, I'm sure actually they're pretty good, interesting stories around that, whatever they can come up with.
Yeah, so if you haven't checked them out, their video is actually out on our Astromagistus YouTube site. So spell it out, Astromagistus. You'll go to there, subscribe, find the video, like it, share it with your friends, and then on Tuesday, come and hang out with us, like our video, comment, share it with your friends.
Absolutely. You
And
know
you
what?
do
That
that
was
every day.
really good. That's the full package. Exactly. And while we're at it, can you also talk about why we decided to call us the Blast from the Past? What led to
Oh,
that
we
name?
are the blast of the past because you know what? And I think it was just the end of an era was all of those glorious 90s talk shows. So think about your Ricky Lakes, your Phil Donahue, your Jerry Springer, your Maury's, even like Dr. Phil around in the 90s or was he 2000s?
I think he was 2000s, Dr. Phil.
2000s. Okay. We
Yes,
know Oprah was around in the 90s.
absolutely. Yeah, that's when she started. But also, she, of course, became like full blown in the zeros more.
Yeah, she was also yeah, I think she was like in the 80s, kind of was there in the 90s, but she blew up. Like her empire
Yes,
started in the 2000s,
exactly.
I would say.
Yes. Yeah,
But
she
yeah,
became
so
really
we're
big.
we're taking our take on those glorious talk shows and we'll have a different subject every week. So if you are interested in, being a part of our lovely crowd, especially when it comes to our talk shows, you can always write to us. You can also comment in the comment section like, hey, I want to be a part of this. And you can send us your chart. We can read your chart on the air and you can let us know how it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into it. We're talking about Saturn today. So I think a lot of us have had Saturn moments in our life, but we just didn't know when it was happening or why it was happening. Saturn tends to be the taskmaker and the whipcracker of the zodiac if we're not counting the outer planets. One of the things that you want to look at when you're looking at your Saturn is where in the cycle of Saturn are you at? Okay, so
And
go
and
ahead.
when maybe you want to point out at this moment also that Saturn's total revolution around the sun is between 27 and 29 and a half years. So,
Yes.
and we always split the circle into like easy digestible degrees. So we have a 90 degrees and a 180 degrees. Those are more the disharmonious connections, if you like. So
Yes.
if we have a 90 degree, it's about a quarter of the way, basically. So often that would be around the like 7, 8 year old. Then you get to the 14-year-old, that's the Saturn opposition. Then you have a
Hmm.
21-year-old, and actually the 21-year-old collides with your Uranus first square. So there's like if you like, a waning Saturn square and a waxing Uranus square, kind of happening at the same time around the age of 2021.
Yes.
And then, of course, we get to the Saturn return around 27 to 29. So years that Saturn is reflecting back to himself through these degrees, 90, 180, and 270. So again, about the 28 years makes it the easiest, divided into four is every 7 years. You can probably, minus plus minus a few months here and there, you can probably find the energy stronger, particularly in the young children, because they have not learned to integrate that energy as nicely or as sufficiently into their birth chart as an adult has. And maybe LaTrisha, if you want to tell us a little bit more about that, and also bring it to the the talk show style, like how would you deal with what kind of typical situations would we face in a talk show that reflect these
Well, we're about
difficulties?
to get to that. You can't give them
Exactly.
everything right away. We're like 15 minutes in, Jay. We got like 45 minutes to go, man.
I want to tease, I want to keep our people.
Instead, he wins the race. Well, like think about this in lifestyle. So when it comes to your Saturn, when you're a child, so let's talk about that 7 year aspect. So that's what we're kind of leaving the sextile. We're going into a waxing square. Kids are looking at structure. This is when parents are trying to teach them structure. They're learning about things in life. This is also when kids start going to school. So they're learning to interact with other people. They're learning their limitations. They're learning responsibilities. They're also learning responsibilities and consequences. Add another 7 years to that. They're probably getting into their square almost opposition phase, Jay?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
when they get to that phase, now it's like, oh, well, I know what my limits are, but now I want to test them.
Yeah.
What are kids typically like? when they get to their 14, 15, 16-year-old phase. They're beating
Yep.
at the walls. They're starting to smell themselves. They're starting to get snippy with their parents and authority. They're trying to buck against authority. And if you want to look at it in a different way, think about what Saturn rules. It rules Capricorn and it rules Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
And Aquarius, even though the modern ruler is Uranus, Aquarius is also about taking those boundaries to the next level, or those limitations to the next level, where Capricorn is more of let's keep everything contained.
Absolutely. So how would you now, talking about this, because we always say we go from one sign to another, and it's basically one extreme to the next extreme. Like the next sign always tries to even out the extreme of the one before, but then it starts having its own extreme. So for example, Aquarius being the rebel against the ruler, basically, wanting to make changes and all that. So how do you reconcile Saturn being responsible for both of these signs? Like when
Oh,
when we look at Saturn, where would you have that Aquarius bit where he's acting against rule, or where he's willing to become revolutionary and innovative and all that?
oh, that's a good question, because this is something I was thinking about the other day when we decided to take this as our topic for today. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you best explain that, the difference between Saturn and Capricorn versus Saturn and Aquarius? And I think it's more of when you're looking at Aquarius, because let's think about Aquarius. Aquarius is fixed air, it's masculine. It's taking those ideals that you've been honing in your earth sign, which is Capricorn, which is fixed earth and feminine, taking those internal ideas, and now you got to express them. Now you got to put them out there. And if we're going back to where Saturn is for, let's say, a teenager in that almost first opposition phase, now it's like I have to let go of these things. I have to reevaluate. And sometimes that reevaluation can be, all right, we're moving forward and we got more, we're able to do more because we got more responsibility. Now you can take the car out without the parents being in the car with you. Now you can go out on dates and nobody's worried about you being home by curfew, things like that. And
Okay.
then we get hit with the first Saturn opposition. Think about around this time, you're 21.
No, 21 is the Saturn square, the waning Saturn
Okay,
square.
is it the waning Saturn square or the waxing Saturn square?
No, the waning for it's the waxing for Uranus, but the waning for Saturn.
Ah, got you. Okay, so it's the waning Saturn square. So now we're starting to realize that these things that we were holding responsibility for, now we have to change them
Mm.
because new things are coming up. We're starting to get comfortable with where we are now.
So, yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. And if you want to bring it to a personal level, do you have any anecdote out of your own life, like when you were in the first Saturn opposition around 14? Did
Mm.
you have any kind of, like, what was your life like when you were at that age?
The crazy thing is I don't remember a lot of my life up until like I think it was like maybe like the end of my undergraduate years, which I know I was definitely like 23, 24. That's when I
Yes.
actually start remembering things. You got to ask like my family members, my mom, what I was like before then.
That might be an interesting thing to dig into at another time. The talk show about what makes you forget the first 20 years of your life.
Right. That's why I was like, why did you forget like up to like your first Saturn return? I was like, I don't know. There was a lot coming at me. Had to dump some
Yeah.
of it out of the brain in order to pick up the other stuff.
But I actually can contribute to that a little bit, because I also have as you said, Capricorn is the sign that is ruled by Saturn, and
Mm-hmm.
in my particular instance, if we take the first 29 years until the first Saturn return as what we call the Placidus house system.
Mm-hmm.
In that house system, the sign of Capricorn, in my case, was intercepted, which means it doesn't sit on a house cusp. It's basically completely swallowed, and that was the first house. So then, of course, these Saturn, because again, Saturn is the ruler, these Saturn moments probably brought more consciousness to me than I typically had, because when you have a sign and therefore the planetary ruler intercepted, sort of, that energy is intercepted, it does not have its own outlet, if you want, then some of it is more internalized. You don't realize how that works on you or in the world. And at the age of 14, I was actually forced to look at a very stark choice at that age,
What was
which
that?
was, well, basically that was the ninth grade in my life, and my mother being she has like, particularly regarding work and all that, she has a very traditional perspective, and she was a hairdresser,
Mhm.
and in her mind I should have become her heir in the beauty salon that she owned. So, I mean, here we have tradition, which of course it's also Saturn theme, right? So that Saturn theme struck me right there. She's like, well, I give you incentives if you leave school, and I would really want you to be the person who takes over my shop once I'm gone and all that. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be a hairdresser, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I didn't see myself as a hairdresser. I saw myself in a completely different way. And of course, when I look at the rest of my chart, I understand why. But of course, at that time, I had no clue about any of this. So but by instinct, I was like, no, I really don't want to. And I had to fight my mother, basically, against, she wanted me to leave school, I wanted to stay in school, and we really
Mm.
had a kind of like a tug of war going on between us for quite a few months until
Mm.
I won, basically. But yeah, that was pretty intense, and that was exactly the Saturn opposition, my first
Oh
Saturn
wow.
opposition, and that also happened to be in fifth to 11th house. So the fifth house is the natal position, 11th is the future
Mm.
situations. The 11th house being positive things, and organizations and friends and all that, but it's also the like future plans and future orientation, because it's the house of Aquarius in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and which is very future oriented. So it was interesting that my professional future would be coming up at that moment, at that time. It was the Saturn opposition, and it was a pretty strong one for me.
Okay, very interesting. I'm
Mm.
trying to think, like, I can't really, like I said, I can't really think of anything when it comes to my Saturn opposition. However, I got things to think about with my Saturn return.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people who go into astrology, and once you get into a certain point of astrology, everybody knows what their Saturn return feels like. Like I've actually had people that are younger than me, and they're like, "Oh my God, this, that, what happened?" I said, "Okay, so you're like what, 27, 28, almost
Mm.
30?" And they'll be like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, don't worry. You're going through your Saturn return. You'll be fine."
you might end up in a completely different movie,
Right.
but you will be fine. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But so if you're familiar with astrology, you kind of know what the Saturn return is and how it feels. So a Saturn return essentially is when you're transiting Saturn, the Saturn that is moving in the sky right now, meets up with your natal Saturn. So you've done a full Saturn cycle in your birth chart, and now it's the grand reset. So things are going to start filling off. You may be feeling double the Saturn energy. Things may be coming at you hard and fast, or slow and not so fast. Or yeah, you know what I mean. But I can say for myself, there was a lot of things coming at me hard and fast during my Saturn return. I think, what was I, 30-ish? Uh, my father had his first hospital situation where we thought he was not going to survive. I was going through like financial issues. I was in my graduate studies. I was going through financial issues. I think like I was with a dude that didn't care for me, and I was trying to get rid of him. It was a whole bunch of foolishness happening at one time. And the only thing I can remember is like I was in a quad somewhere. I was like full bust out crying. And then like one professor, I don't even know who this man is. He came up to me. He asked if I was okay. And I was telling him everything that was going on. And he just handed me his handkerchief. Was like, "You're going to be okay. Just get it out. It's going to be okay." And, I slobbed and I pretty much messed up his whole handkerchief. I think I may still have that handkerchief. And I have no idea who that man is. I have never seen him after that day. But this is why I always tell people, when your Saturn return comes, it's going to feel like your world is falling apart, but more than likely you're going to get through it, you know? And if you're lucky, you may see another Saturn return, which doesn't happen until what you're around, I think, what, 60, 62?
58. 58.
58. There we go. So what was your Saturn return like, Jay?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I would like to point out actually with the Saturn returns, the and that's actually true for any of the planetary situations. You can kind of almost expect a certain time delay between the actual exact planetary situation
Oh, that's
and
true.
results. So
Mhm.
even though the Saturn return may be between 27 and 29 and a half, for me it was actually almost 30. Um, and it so happened that it was actually also the exact conjunction with Jupiter at that moment. It was in the year
Oh, wow.
2000. Yeah, it was the year 2000. It was the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, which actually has its own little thing going on. I mean, we don't go into that right now, but talking about mundane astrology and how different planetary pairs have a certain energy that takes the world into certain directions. But yeah, that was exactly on my natal Saturn return to the minute, actually.
Hmm.
And oh yeah, that took me yet on another spin entirely. And of course, this is something that doesn't it didn't happen exactly at that moment, but within half a year, actually within a year. I mean, shortly after that, we had 9/11 going on, right? And I'm
Hmm.
sure everybody
That
knows
was
or remembers
2001.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember where I
And
was when that happened.
no, I think most do, and basically
Yeah.
for me that meant a complete chapter of my life was meant to end. I mean, for a lot of people a chapter ended, but for me, not related to this, but it was roughly around that time of 9/11 that everything changed in my life as well. But the problem was is that not having had any understanding of astrology at this point yet, because I really didn't get to it until I was 33.
That's
Um, I kind of was completely lost for a long time. That's what I meant when you say, "Yeah, well, you wake up in a completely different movie." That is what happened to me. I don't want to go into the changing of houses and all that because it becomes a little bit too technological, too technical
We'll
for
save that
our
for a different show.
yeah, yeah, and we want to do the talk show really kind of like lighthearted, and I also want to bring it back to the situation with
Yeah, because we
the
still got to talk about our
exactly
guests, our
exactly
guest hosts.
and the 90s talk show situation. But I would say I would have been a perfect, probably a perfect guest for Dr. Phil or something like that, O'Donoghue. It's like, what do you happen when you go to bed in one place and wake up in another place and you have absolutely no memory of it?
Mhm.
How you got from one to the other place and what that does to your psyche. Unfortunately, when it happens to you, like what I just said, then I mean that is going on in a day, and you can figure out what happened. But when it happens in your life and nobody is telling you, there's a possibility that happens around the Saturn return. You just need to take a look at what's going on in your chart. I wished I had that advice. I tell you.
Yeah.
Um, so, but in the end, I would say it took me where I am now, and yeah, I was a little bit slow in that. It took me 10 years to figure it out because I took so long to also study astrology, but eventually I got there. Now, so literally what happened is just, I'm kind of like, between the US and Europe all the time. So, and at that time I had been in the US a long time, and that life that I did in the US, which was management consulting and all that, somehow was meant to end. And I was supposed to be back in Europe and, figure out how to continue. And like I said, that's when I started the astrology studies, which I did distance studying with London while I was living in Germany and so on. So it was it was a crazy time. And like I said, it's like you get one of the things we didn't look at yet is when we look at Saturn, and probably true for any of the planets, but they do say when Saturn moves through the houses, and like you start, or through the chart, if you want, your entire chart wheel, you start obviously at the moment when you're born, and then when Saturn moves through all the different houses of the chart wheel, you get a dose of reality, one house after another, one life segment
Hmm.
after another. And by the time you return to your Saturn origin, that's basically when the seriousness of life starts, because now you had basically, you were dabbling a little bit here and there, but now you have to get serious about things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
again, this is also the situation with Saturn. Saturn is the planet of you have to face reality. You have to become serious, adult, grown up. Make your own choices, be accountable. These kinds of things. And basically, so the first 30, like the first 27 to 30 years, is more or less testing the waters, finding out, okay, what is reality like? Because he's moving every 2.5 years. From if you have equal houses and the Placidus houses, that can be definitely a different scenario. But depending on how big your houses are, how many degrees your houses have, some are very short, some are big. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, then that's actually another thing to look at. It's talking of which, because when somebody has a very, like the further north you go, the more like the houses change in size and
Yeah, the
everything.
houses start to get skewed once you start
Exactly.
going north or south 60 degrees.
Absolutely. And then you say, okay, well, Saturn is in this sphere of life for so many years, because
Mm-hmm.
2.5 years normally in an equal house, because it's, that's how you split the circle. But maybe in this particular chart, it's in that house, in that life system for like 6 7 years, so you get very used to that. And then all of a sudden it goes into another part and it's only in there for like 9 months, right? And then,
Yep.
so I would think that also that gives us, and that is not very researched very well, how these, like, lengths of house width, basically, how that reflect in people's life at that time. I don't think many people look into that when they do the chart reading, and
You know
how
what?
the
You just
person's
brought up
life.
a good question. Now
Yeah,
that you say it like that, is this why people that are more up north are more serious?
maybe, could well be, because
Huh.
something get, I mean, that's Saturn getting stuck in a
That,
certain house
that lack
position.
of sun or something, or Saturn just taking this nice little time tracking across that one big
One
house.
house,
It's
exactly.
making
And
you
you're
extra serious.
absolutely, and you're dragged through, like,
Just
all of
drag
that's
through
like
the whole
very
time.
a very, very thorough experience with that house theme. Exactly, yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
could well be. I mean, I don't think I cannot remember having anybody ever really looking into that, or talking about this, with the different um, house sizes, and Saturn moving through that as a planet, like how that might impact the people that live through that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's something to look into.
That's something to know. So, any future astrologist that is watching this show right now, if you take this as your research project, you better tag the Astromagistus team so that we know this got done.
Exactly, absolutely. And this video is going to be around for a very long time, so you can always add comments to it whenever you want to. And by the way, I just wanted to point out that the QR code in the top left takes you to the Astromagistus website. So exactly. So you can always, actually, the other direction.
Oh, there we go. It's reverse on my side. Yes, go that way. Don't go that way. Go that way. That way is the logo. That way is the QR
Exactly.
code.
So with the QR code, you can find the website. All right, but see, I
Yes.
mean, you were worried about the time. See, now we already have half an
Yeah,
hour, and it's
we
like nothing.
so we got this because we got to get into something very important. And this is, I think, is a
And
question that a lot of people don't think about when they're looking at their Saturn and their Saturn cycle. And how does it compare to someone else's Saturn cycle? Especially like if you're in a relationship with them. Think about lovers, think about bosses and employees, think about parents and their kids. So you ever see
Mhm.
that parent that has that one rambunctious, like super rambunctious teenager that they're always like screaming at each other from like opposite ends of the room? Could be because of their Saturns. They're in different phases of their Saturns, and those Saturns are knocking up against each other. Some people have easy Saturn phases or life cycles, and some do not. So, if this was a TV show, we'd be bringing our first group of guests onto the stage. And I think that this pair, if you've been around pop culture, especially in the 80s and the 90s, you have definitely seen them in some way, shape, or form. So let's talk about the illustrious Joan Crawford and her daughter Christina Crawford. Okay. Jay, do you? Yes. So if you don't know Joan Crawford was an actress back in like what, the 60s, Jay?
I think she started actually earlier.
I
I mean,
believe.
given that she was born in 1908 or 9. I mean, her birth year is a little bit obscure, but it's
Yeah, that's
1906,
right.
1908, around that time. I think her first movies came out actually in the late 30s already. But while you're
Okay, so
talking,
yeah,
let me
she was
let me
already a
research
big
that real
star.
quick. Yeah, yeah, she was a big star at that time.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, she was a very big actress, had like several films and awards, and then one day she decided she wanted to have kids, but she, I believe, was unmarried and she wanted to adopt. And if you don't know anything about acquiring children back in the day, if you were not married, they were not trying to give them to you. So through some way, shape, or form, probably a couple of backorder devil deals, her then lover was able to find a child for her, and that was Christina Crawford. So Christina is very famous for writing a book that is known as Mommy Dearest, and it was her experience living with Joan Crawford. And there was a movie that came out about it in the 80s, I believe. So
Yes, I mean the movie Mommy Dearest that was played by what was the actress again that
Faye
played
Dunaway.
exactly Faye Dunaway, and that was
Yeah,
in
that was Faye.
1982 actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm. So it got some pretty. I don't think it got any awards, but it was very much a cult classic for a couple of particular scenes. So if you ever see anybody screaming "No wire hangers," that
Yes.
is where that comes from.
Yep.
And then
And if I may interrupt you real quick, so we give you a little bit
mhm,
more back history information about Joan Crawford. So and this is something that is also what we already integrate in the website as well. We do work with ChatGPT and different other large language models. So we do work a little bit with artificial intelligence. And for certain things, it's very, very useful. And in this case, for example, I wanted to find out what were the few first movies that Joan Crawford was involved in. And you would believe it. Actually,
mhm.
she started in 1925 with a silent movie called Lady of the Night. So
Oh
she
wow,
actually,
okay.
yeah, so she was actually already around in the silent movie, phase. And then she actually, a lot of actresses and actors didn't make it out of that phase when sound became
Hmm.
available. Many did fell by the wayside, and she
Yeah.
obviously was one that made it into the sound movies.
So we know she
Yeah,
has staying power, so that's got something to do with her Saturn.
most likely, and also her breakthrough film, and this is what I'm getting here is, uh, she was. So what it says here is her breakthrough film that sorry, her breakthrough film that catapulted her to major stardom as a symbol of the flapper was Our Dancing Daughters in 1928. So you have to
Hmm.
keep in mind that her daughter was born in 1939 in Los
Yes.
Angeles. So she had a good like almost 15 years of being in the movie and film industry, and she became big 10 years before that birth. So she was a big
Hmm.
star at that time, right?
Hmm. So she was a big
So
star. And
yeah.
then when we get to the point where she adopts Christina, that stardom starts to change.
And what happened? I mean, this is 1939 that we're talking about now. Obviously, also the beginning of the war around the world, and the U.S. entering 1942 a few years later. So I guess public interest also shifted to a certain degree away from certain things. But what happened to Joan Crawford at that time? And
That's a good.
by the way, how old was she at that time? Like around 1937, 38,
That was about the time of
39?
her Saturn opposition.
No, that was her Saturn return,
Her
actually.
return. That's right. You're right. Your Saturn return.
So maybe she was like, is these are the things that we can look at. And if they were on stage with us right now, I'd say like, well, was it about the time, dear Joan, when you were thinking about what is life really all about? Is it really only glitz, glimmer
Mhm.
in Hollywood?
Or is she
Or
trying to leave a legacy?
exactly, would you want to have a legacy? Do you want to have children? Do you want, something more in your life, something more serious other than this like flippant little movie things?
Hmm.
And I mean, that would be my question to her as an astrologist. Like, was that? I mean, that completely fits the Saturn return. I mean, then again, we would have to take a look at her Saturn placement in her natal chart. Unfortunately, since she was so worried about her age, by the way, another Saturn topic, um, she decided to like gaslight everybody on her age. So nobody really knows the year that she was born in. It's pretty settled that it was the 23rd of March, but we don't know if it's 1903 or 1904, something like that, 1906 or 1908. She always said
Right.
1908, but her daughter said 1904, I believe, and they say most
Mhm.
1906 based on college. There's a college registration of hers from 1922, and they say that that is the most likely correct because she was not a famous person at this time. So, and I think that is what you ran with when you did her chart, right? You
Yes, and we have that, don't we?
we do have the chart available. Do you want to bring it up?
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring it up. And you already brought it up. I was going to say, while you're bringing it up, Jay, also remember that that was quick, just like we are here at Astrologist, uh, is that if you don't know your birth chart or your birth time, you can always talk to one of our astrologists about your chart rectification, figuring
Yes.
out through, list of events that has happened in your life. We can figure out where you probably were born. To some people, depending on where you live, you may not actually have a birth time listed on your birth certificate if you have a birth certificate.
As a matter of fact, till today, in many Muslim countries, they do not, take the birth time down on the birth certificate. So, but even in modern, like in non-Muslim countries, that happens quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, obviously you need the birth time, and as you just said, thank you for pointing that out, LaTrisha. We do have some experts on our team at Astromagistus. Go to the rectification chart, and there you will find it. And you just book that, and the specialist will help you figure the birth time out. And once you have that, it unlocks the kingdom of your life. So,
Yeah. You get to see all the good things, the good and the bad.
and bad. Well, actually, it gives you literally it gives you an oversight, and it can say, yeah, let us help you to experience the good a little bit longer and try to avoid the bad as much as possible. Because, but then again, always something to keep in mind. Bad is always also a matter of perception, of course,
You're right.
and sometimes we perceive something to be bad at the moment because it doesn't fit into our plans. But again, we talk about Saturn as the realist, and sometimes it is necessary that we get a break from our illusions and start look at reality, and work with what is at hand rather than what we would like it to be. So, that can apply to work, that can apply to relationships, of course, to any kind of situation. So okay, let's continue
All right, let's
with the
do it.
chart.
So the
So now
inner circle.
imagine we are on stage with Ricky Lake or Cherry Springer or whatever, and we have these. I mean, we're looking at two charts, right? I mean, I know I'm
Mhm.
jumping the gun a little bit, but we're looking at two charts, and maybe you can still like imagine we have these two people on stage, and what would be their? Why are they on in our talk show? What is the situation going on here?
Well, we already know that Joan and Christina have had a lot of contention in their life. There's pretty much been allegations of abuse. Um, Christina has written a whole book about it, and there was a movie created based on it. However, Christina, if you go through some of her past interviews and whatnot, says she didn't really care for the movie because it made Joan look a little more, it humanized Joan versus the experience that Christina had for her. And if you talk to a lot, I'm not going to say a lot of, but Joan's other children. So, for example, Joan actually adopted a set of twins, and their experience with her was way different than Christina and her younger brother's experience with Joan. So maybe if we're looking at it like Joan is a guest and she doesn't understand why her daughter Christina may be acting the way she is towards her.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here to find out why.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So
so when we look at the birth charts, I mean, what I see here right now is the Blastus house system, and we have the inner wheel is Joan,
Joan,
right? Exactly.
yes.
Okay. So, by the
And then
way,
outer will is Christina.
yeah, and by the way, looking at the MC in Pisces, that often is our actors. They often have Pisces as an MC Just to point
Really?
that out. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, because when you look at Pisces as the chameleon, the form changer, right?
Because they're
And
boundless.
exactly. And so you, as a Pisces, have the ability to fit, to adapt, to change into anything. It's a flexible sign also, and
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of like symbolize what people want to see in you and all that. So, you're also a projection screen, if you want. People see in you what they want to see. For some
Mm-hmm.
reason, that works with Pisces in that way, and that's why you would see that often, either the Neptune conjunct MC or close to the MC, or a Pisces MC. Quite a bit when you look at actors. Yes.
Interesting. That's good to know.
So,
Especially considering that her Saturn is in Pisces.
yeah, well, yes, adds to the whole story, and the moon. The moon is
Mm-hmm.
conjunct, right? I mean, well, we have to point out, obviously, also we don't have her birth time. So what you did right now is the 12 o'clock, right?
Right. We did it 12 o'clock because she was a
Yes.
day chart, or she was
Yes.
born in a day, from what we understand.
Yeah, but we don't know the time, the day. So it might actually have been a completely different one. But I would not be surprised if she had been born around that time. Again, looking only at the Pisces MC, which would make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Also with then the moon in Pisces, and that would be the ascendant, of course, the ruler of the ascendant, the chart ruler. It would give her the ability again to be very flexible in how, like, changing her mood according to situations, being able to manipulate her mood even to a certain degree, to fake,
Mm-hmm.
like, to fake something, right? So
Right.
um, so I would think, actually, even normally that would maybe not be the case, but in this particular instance, I could see that she would be born times actually sometime around noontime, because this would
Okay.
fit quite nicely into her being the actress that she was. But maybe you tell a little bit more about what you see.
I think, oh, I was looking at both of their charts together when I had pulled this up, because one of the things that I thought was actually pretty interesting is that Joan is born a Saturn in Pisces, but Christina has Aries in Pisces, or not Saturn in Pisces, but Saturn in Aries.
Hmm.
So it's one sign over, and also Saturn is in fall in Aries.
Yes.
So it's
So what
not
does it
very happy there.
So what does it do to somebody when you have Saturn in fall? Like, I mean, obviously, a lot of people have Saturn in Aries, and
Mhm.
which is in fall, and they all live a happy life. So, but what would, if you want to talk about dignities and all that, and obviously we talk about traditional astrology right now, how does a planet in fall or in detriment, uh, like, how would you experience that versus it being exalted or in domicile? Domicile meaning in its
So
own sign.
here's
Mhm.
what I'd like to describe to people when it comes to rulership, exaltation,
Yes.
detriment, and fall.
Yeah.
So think about rulership. This is my house. I live here. I make the rules, right?
Hmm.
But when I'm not here, I'm giving you the keys. So let's say I'm Mars and Aries, right? That's my house. I live here. I
Hmm.
make the rules. But if I'm not going to be here, I'm going to give it to somebody I'm comfortable with making the rules. So we've gone from now rulership to exaltation. Who's exalted in Aries? The sun. I'm handing my keys over to the sun. They can make the rules until I come back. They're very comfortable here. They know where they know to clean the dishes when they're done eating. They know to put the dog up, right? But say I let somebody who is not as comfortable with making the rules in my house, that's detriment.
Hmm.
If I let a total
Okay.
stranger into my house and they don't know where anything is, that's fall. They're trying to leave ASAP because they don't want to be there.
Right. While you're saying that, I'm thinking, like, I mean, in this case, we have Jones side. So that, again, let's go back to having these two on our stage, and we're looking at this,
Mhm.
and we say, well, Joan, you're quite forceful. I mean, your sun in Mars is quite strong. It's not in domicile, but it's exalted. It feels really
Mhm.
good in that position. But you have to realize that. Sometimes that energy might come across as a little bit strong, because it's willful, and it doesn't. I mean, Aries as the first sign does not really pay that much attention to the other, because Aries is
Mm-hmm.
me, myself, and I. The other
Yes.
would be Libra, and that's a reason also why the Sun in Libra is considered in fall, because it cannot be itself so easily. It always has to look at what do others want, how can I please others, etc. So in this case
Exactly.
with Joan Crawford, um, I think, I mean, if I'm onto something, I'm like, well, Joan, I would say, Joan, this was your first child. The other children came later, right? They came in 1945 and 1947 or something like that. So at that
Mm-hmm.
time, basically, um, maybe, and this is something that, Christina, you probably are not too happy about, but in a way, you taught your mother to be a better mother. Because you were fighting her like willfulness and her like maybe even egocentric behaviors. I mean, we have to take a look at this and we say, oh, wait a minute. Now we have also Venus in Aries. Now she's not happy there because
Mm-hmm.
that is definitely a detriment to her.
Yep.
And so the Sun is great. And this is more of a male energy, the Sun, right? Now the Venus being the female energy, she's like, wait a minute. I'm not happy in this kind of situation.
Nope.
And then we also have Mercury with that. And again, we get this willfulness. And if you take a look at this, where's Mars? It's in Taurus, right?
Mars, yeah.
Well,
Mars
then
isn't
again,
exactly happy in
detriment.
Taurus either.
Yeah. So Mars is not happy in Taurus. Venus is not happy in Aries. Now they are in mutual reception, however, so they can console each other of being, it's like two sub stories meeting each other and
Mm-hmm.
being unhappy about that they're sitting in the wrong place, right? It's like, you know what, you're in my place and I'm in your place, but at least we can exchange our ideas and maybe you can give me a few tips how to survive in your field. So,
This is very
you know,
true.
but this is now feeding into her Sun because of course the Mars at this time is also, we always want to look at the dispositorship and what a final
Mm-hmm.
dispositorship is, and here we have a loop between the two, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that loop feeds into the Sun as an Aries. So I would say, you know what, she really is kind of like she wants to build something lasting. Taurus is material, it's lasting. Maybe she was really after money and all that, and maybe again we have this Saturn return that says, it's not about glitz, glimmer, and money, and it's not all about you. You want to have a family, but then again, she also looks like a very independent woman with all this
Mm-hmm.
Mars energy, or not Mars, but this Aries energy. Now here comes along her daughter, and the daughter has what falls on her Sun?
Her
Jupiter.
sun is in Jupiter, yeah.
Yeah, it's Jupiter and the moon. So Jupiter and the moon in Aries, that also wants to
Yep.
do its own thing. It wants to be free. It
Yeah.
wants to have its liberty and everything. Now we're veering away from Saturn right now. We'll get to the Saturn point, but you just have to also understand these two. So it's like, look, mommy, you're one who is really willful and you want to do your thing. And your daughter, everything that you tell her, she will feel like you're taking away her liberty and freedoms. She wants to
Mm-hmm.
be able to move and roam, but you are trying to give her the rules, right?
Yeah. And
So
she does not want that.
exactly. So you have a daughter that wants to be free. She wants to roam. She wants to explore. I mean, Aries is the pioneer. And in her situation, oh my God, look at that Mars. It's in Aquarius. Now, if you know anything about Aquarius, that sure has its own head and it wants to do its own thing whenever it feels the energy is
Mm-hmm.
there. So, yeah. And a Mars, and this is really even more. So her Mars and the mom's Mars are in square. So we have these two energies fighting for dominance, basically. Now, who's gonna get their way? It's basically two rams, fighting with their horns down. And I think this is
Yep.
also where the whole story comes in, where we could say, damn, yeah, you guys are just both, you don't give way, do you? You're
At
basically,
all.
at all. I mean, both of them stand there like, the
It's
literal
my way or the
goats.
highway, and neither one of them is
Exactly.
taking the highway.
It's like two goats meeting on a very narrow path in a very steep mountain range. there's a
And I feel
there's
like
a
if they were here on stage, they would be throwing bows right now. They
exactly.
would definitely be trying to fight each other.
Absolutely. So, and that is the story that you have, and that's probably why her siblings did not have the same story, because they would be born with a completely different setup. But here we have
Mm-hmm.
worlds collide, literally. And her son in Gemini probably is not, as prominent that, because Gemini can swing either direction, right? So it can do what it wants,
Mm-hmm.
and so So now let's bring you to the Saturn, because you know what? We only have 5 minutes left, and you need to
Oh
go.
man, we've
And
been going at it.
I'm telling you, time flies. That see, you're like at the beginning, you're like, no, don't go so fast. We have
No, we
45
can't go
minutes
so
of
fast.
filler
We're
left.
down around the time. Oh no! Oh my god!
And now I'm taking the other position. Come on, we need to get to the end here. So
All right.
bring it to the Saturn. These two are on the stage now. What can you tell
Yes.
them
So
about the Saturn now?
we're looking at their Saturns, and it looks like if I'm eyeballing this correctly, that they are either coming out of conjunction, so they're moving away from each other, so they're past the square, not the square, the sextile phase, moving in the square. Does that look like it's does that look correct to you, Jay?
Well, it's almost it's going into almost a sextile.
Oh, it's a
but
separating
yeah,
sextile.
it's
That's a better way
yeah.
of saying it.
Well, it's actually
So
no, it's an applying one.
is it applying? I can't
Well,
tell.
the Saturn in 28-degree Aries is actually going towards then it goes into, then it moves into Taurus, and at 8-degree Taurus it would be sextile the 8-degree
Okay.
Pisces, but it's separating but we don't look at that the semi-square.
Right. Okay. So I think that they're out of the building years of learning responsibility. And now I think we're heading towards rebellion with them, especially in the terms of Christina. Christina, like you talked about, wants to do her own thing. Joan says, no, you got to pay attention to me and what I want for you. So like, and a good example of this, if you ever watched the movie Mommy Dearest, is that there was a time that they were eating dinner. And I think the steak that Joan had presented was undercooked. Christina didn't want to eat it. And Joan said, you're going to eat this. And she refused. And she wouldn't let her eat anything else until she ate that steak. That steak Joan made sure that steak was next to Christina for at least 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And she still wouldn't eat it.
Yep. Well, I mean, didn't we just talk about that? Like two rams?
Two rams. They're going to keep going at it. There's really no real resolution in a lot of the things that were happening to them.
No, until one dies, basically, or one is going down the precipice or something like that. It's like, okay, I don't give way, you don't give way, and we can stand here for a very long time, but eventually one will either die or fall down the precipice or whatever. But yes.
And in this case, it was Joan. Joan exited first.
Well, and the point is obviously, she's the older one. And in this case, I would say this is a very tough call. Being on stage, I say, you know what? I can see that both of you guys, or both of you women, are very headstrong. And you have to learn how to be a little bit more cooperative and to find a middle way, compromise. Because you cannot continue like that, particularly if you live under one roof, right? Sure. And that also is actually a matter of, like, how would you think? Again, we see that this Mars is actually somewhat almost like the final dispositor, together with Venus, of course, but still in her chart.
Wait,
here.
Who's Mars? Jones or Christina?
Jones.
Okay.
Jones. But Christina Saturn is sitting on that Mars in a conjunction.
Yeah. True.
So how does that feel for Joan? She feels that her daughter is demanding all the time. She's this Saturn heavyweight on her. She cramps her style.
Mm-hmm. And I think also because she doesn't want her to be, but I also think it's when you're talking about cramping her style, she's trying to push her out of the way so she can get back to whatever she feels makes her look good, what makes Joan look good, because you got to remember all the times that Joan pushed Christina into boarding school.
Yep. Again, she wanted her way. She did not want her to cramp her style anymore. Remember? Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you want to wrap it up real quick, because we're actually hitting the last minute of our show.
Oh, we are. So yes. I would say let's do a quick recap. So we talked about our life cycles of Saturn, looking at it through squares and oppositions and returns. We talked about how we gave a perfect example. If we were to bring Joan Crawford and Christina Crawford on a 90s talk show, how would that look? They're pretty much going to be fighting it out. It might turn into Jerry Springer very quickly. But also, just remember, if you are interested in any of this, come back and check us out Tuesdays at 2 every week on YouTube. We are the Blast from the Past, 1990 style. And anything else you want to think of, Jay, real quick?
Actually, no, you put it together really fine. I mean, I would just say thank you for everybody on stage. Thank you, LaTrisha, for being such a wonderful co-host. And everybody, like LaTrisha said, please come to us again. We're happy to have you anytime. Tuesdays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern. And yeah, we look forward to having you. And
All right.
hopefully you enjoyed yourselves. Thank you very much,
Yes.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Come back and see us. Like and subscribe.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.